So I have the honor and the task to open the session today. I'll try to have a lively presentation about switch points in logistics. So we're talking about today, this morning, investments in logistics. And I think this is a very hard task these days, how to plan for your investments, given the high uncertainty and volatility that we see in the markets and the big changes and sudden changes that we see in the context of business and the economic context. So I will present this research that Roland Berger Strategy Consultants did together with the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, with the Chair of Logistics, where we try to define a new methodology and a new way to look at what are the key switch points in logistics. And I will explain what switch points are, what we mean by that. So, first of all, this work has been done together with over 150 international experts in logistics, and it's based on interviews that we made. First, we prepared some key topics, and then we tested these key topics. I think what is interesting is that we identified 18 volatile topics that are the most important when it comes to the investments in logistics. So let's just think about, for example, the strategic realignment or the consolidation and cooperation changes that we see in the economic context, so the fast evolution and the fast changes that we see in terms of the business models of different industries, but also the changes in the competitive dynamics that we see globally in different industries. But let's also think about the volatility of key input factors for logistics and for the economy as a whole, such as the fuel price, where we see an increasing volatility and uncertainty, but also more long-term about what will be the major sources of fuel, of energy, let's put it this way, as well as the freight volume. So if we think of prices on one side, volume on the other side, and the main cost factors that affect the logistics, on all the three levers, on all the three dimensions, we really see major changes that strongly affect from one day to another our planning, not only of the day-by-day operations, but also of the future investments that we need to do. And then, as a third area, for example, some counter trends. Until recently, it was a clear trend about globalization. There was a clear trend of globalization that I would argue very few people would dispute, right? Today we actually see, as a consequence of the current economic downturn, an increase in import duties, an increase in protectionism, a limitation to free trade, and therefore a counter tendency against globalization, more in favor to regionalism, as we could call it. Another example would be home shopping versus local retailing. Not long ago, many people would have thought that local retailing, especially in countries like the European countries, would have disappeared in favor of, on one side, the online shopping, on the other side of the large malls, the large distributors. As a matter of fact, this is not the case yet today, and maybe won't be. So how does this methodology of switch points work? I think what is important is that there are not only trends, there are no longer only clear trends where people are basically unanimous or there is a large consensus about the fact that there are some clear trends. More and more today there are switch points, and by switch points we mean some possible changes of which the direction is not yet clear, or some changes in direction where there is a large consensus, which is, however, polarized on opposite directions. And of course, this makes the planning of investments even more difficult, and especially if we add the third dimension, which is the time horizon of when these changes will occur. And I will go through these major changes, these major switch points. So, as I mentioned briefly, a trend is something that has a clear direction where the experts that we interviewed agree about that direction and that kind of trend. A switch point of uncertainty is where there is a clear consensus that at one point there will be a turn point, a switch point, but it is not yet clear in which direction. And then a switch point of opinion spread is where, as mentioned before, there are clear polarized positions about opposite directions. And I will make this very concrete in a minute. There are then additional aspects which we could call the black swans, just to use a quite common example of situations that are very difficult to foresee, but can dramatically change the economic context. And just to make example of black swans, Lehman Brothers in 2008, and most recently the dramatic situation of Greece. So we identified and we classified, we clustered these 18 key aspects that will impact the strategic planning of logistics into 4 categories. So what will be the switch points related to resources? So raw material, recycling cycles, food and water supply imbalance, reduction of the supply imbalance, and cost of fuel. These are key aspects related to the provision supply of resources. Then there are some macroeconomic and lifestyle aspects, such as supply chains, division of tasks in the supply chain, product life cycles, business clusters, meaning global versus local and regional business clusters, how this is going to change, shopping behavior, and then as you see, networks and technology, which is very much at the heart of your daily business. What will be the trend or the switch points in the networks and in the technology that are used in the logistics industry, and therefore where should we place our investments as logistics operators? And then finally, the green logistics, which is more and more an important trend, I would say, but within this trend, there are different switch points related to the level of sustainability, whether this will be a differentiating factor and up to what point it will be. So this is a way to classify trends versus switch points of opinion spread versus switch points of uncertainty. So I will spend a bit more time on this page to clarify what we mean here. As you see, we identified with our panel of interviews 4 clear trends, 5 switch points of uncertainty, and 9 switch points of opinion spread. So let's start from the trends where there is a clear convergence of opinions and a quite high certainty of the respondents about these trends. And the clear trends are related to food and water supply imbalance and raw material sources. And I will come in a minute and give you the indication of what these trends are. And to product life cycles, which are clearly shortening. And to the level of environmental sustainability and the impact that this will have on the logistics industry. So no doubt about these trends. However, when we come to the switch points of opinion spread, we can classify them into 2 areas. So there are some weak switch points of opinion spread where there are opposite views, but not very strongly polarized. And examples could be the division of tasks within the supply chain. Is this going to increase? So more specialization, or are we going to see more and more of integrated logistics companies that cover the supply chain as much as they can? And cost of fuel. How will this be a game changer? But then we also have strong switch points of opinion spread, such as, for example, environmental regulations or the last mile networks, where there are strong opinions and confidence, but again, in the opposite directions, depending on the opinion of the expert. And then we say there are a number of 5 switch points of uncertainty, such as, for example, the routing technology, the business clusters. Are these going to be more global or more specialized? Recycling cycles. But let me this is just to explain the methodology. I think it's important because, again, given the time of uncertainty we are living, we can no longer extrapolate from the past. I think this is clear to everybody. And there are no fortune tellers here who can tell us what the future will look like. So we can only try to consider what are the key aspects that will affect our business, our industry, and then try to consider when these changes will occur and take our best bets.